Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a world of creaking bed frames, flickering gaslight, and the slow drip of a leaky roof. It's sometime in the 1860s, and you're tucked into bed in a middle-class London townhouse. Outside, the streets glow dimly with the eerie new technology of gas lamps, casting long shadows across the foggy cobbles. Inside, your room is oppressively warm from the coal fire, and you've been wrapped like a burrito in scratchy flannel sheets, a knitted coverlet, and something your great-aunt insists is a proper counterpane. The air smells faintly of boiled cabbage and paraffin. The clock ticks with the smug punctuality of someone who never lies awake at night. You, meanwhile, do. And you will. For hours. The sound of a horse clopping past outside is somehow thunderous. You itch. You think you're hungry, but you might also be nauseous. Welcome to Victorian insomnia. And no, you probably won't survive this. Statistically, someone with your symptoms is already being prescribed opium by a chemist who still believes bad dreams can be caused by miasma and tight corsets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie on your back and try not to think, which is impossible, of course, because it's the 19th century and your mattress is stuffed with straw and regret. The bed creaks like it's harboring secrets. You adjust the hot water bottle at your feet, lukewarm now, and listen to your upstairs neighbor's floorboards complaining with every fidget. It's not even midnight. You've done everything your doctor recommended. You read exactly one chapter of Waverly, drank your mug of warm milk with a floating skin that defied physics, and stared at your own reflection in the wash basin until you started to feel like a ghost. Still, you lie there, awake. Achingly, determinately awake. People in your time take sleeplessness seriously. In fact, a growing number of physicians, housewives, and philosophers are suddenly obsessed with sleep, or, more often, the lack of it. It's not just that you're tossing and turning. Society is, too. Historically, people used to sleep in segments, two shorter stretches of rest with a contemplative hour in between. But now, with industrial schedules and gaslighting, the literal kind, Victorians are being gently herded toward the 8 straight hours ideal. Unfortunately, your body hasn't gotten the memo. It still wants to wake up at 2 a.m. and think deeply about your cousin's funeral or whether your chimney sweep is stealing sugar cubes. You roll onto your side, trying to ignore the sound of your own heartbeat. You suspect it's a sign of impending doom. It's probably just digestion. You remember the eel pie you had at dinner and regret everything. The lace curtain flutters. A draft. Or a ghost. You adjust your nightcap. Yes, you're wearing one. Because apparently, people in this era fear brain-chilling breezes more than crime. You attempt a breathing exercise someone at your church recommended. It involves inhaling while thinking of angels. You accidentally think of coffins instead. You wonder if Queen Victoria is also awake. Probably not. She has servants to worry for her. Still, it comforts you to imagine her curled in a vast bed, surrounded by corgis in silence, whispering to the portrait of Albert on her nightstand. Maybe she too once counted the flickers of gaslight on the ceiling and wondered if she should take just a sip of that amber bottle by the bed. A carriage rattles past on the cobblestones. The sound resonates up through the walls like a memory. You briefly entertain the idea that you might get up and write a poem, but the candle is too far away, and you're not sure where the matches went. Also, your feet are cold, and you suspect your slippers are hiding from you again. So you lie there, thinking, listening. The silence grows teeth. You count the ceiling cracks, try to spell your name backward, and finally, out of desperation, start mentally alphabetizing your relatives. There are far too many Ethels. Historians still argue whether Victorian insomnia was truly more rampant or whether people were simply more literate, and thus more able to complain about it in print. But whatever the statistics, you are part of a growing number of city dwellers who find the modern night, now unnaturally bright, eternally noisy, and emotionally overstimulating, a difficult space to rest. You imagine the countryside. You picture lying on a hay mattress in a tiny stone cottage, the scent of heather wafting through the open shutters, the distant bleating of a contented sheep. Then you remember that rural people also lie awake, often from sheer exhaustion or the fear of wolves, or, occasionally, damp. You turn over again. Your hip hits the wooden edge of the bed. A spring twangs with malicious cheer. You close your eyes, determined to sleep. Instead, you recall a newspaper article about a man who hadn't slept in 17 days and began reciting Latin backward before leaping into the Thames. You resolve not to leap into anything, except maybe a bath, maybe tomorrow. And just as your breathing slows, just as you begin to imagine the sweetness of surrender, the neighbor's baby starts crying. Of course, you stare at the ceiling and wonder how something so simple, sleep, has become your nightly Everest. The baby 2 floors up has finally been soothed with an old lullaby and possibly brandy. You're not judging. You've considered worse. Somewhere out in the city, Big Ben tolls one slow, smug chime. The problem, of course, is that there are simply too many things keeping you awake. And not just you. Insomnia has become the newest invisible epidemic in your era. It used to be just the poets and night watchmen who struggled with sleep. Now it's everyone from dock workers to duchesses. Your mind floats through the catalog of Victorian woes. Let's start with the obvious, noise. London never really sleeps anymore. Not with steam-powered factories wheezing into the night, carriage wheels grating on cobblestones, dogs howling, and soot-faced delivery boys shouting obscenities at 4 a.m. Even in smaller towns, the new train lines mean there's always something hissing or screeching past your window. And then there's the light. Gas lamps might seem romantic now, but they're the LED of their time, a shiny new promise with disturbing consequences. Suddenly, people are staying up longer, pushing past their natural rhythms. Your body, built for firelight and early bedtimes, doesn't know what to make of this eternal dusk. You shift on your mattress, pressing your cheek into a pillow that's filled with goose down, or possibly sawdust. It's hard to say. You'd complain, but your cousin's pillow was once stuffed with shredded newspaper, so this is luxury by comparison. Now let's talk about anxiety, the silent killer of sleep. Victorian Britain is nothing if not anxious. The empire is expanding wildly, and with it comes unease. Disease outbreaks crop up every few years: cholera, typhus, smallpox. You're told to drink boiled water, but then again, your landlord insists that's soft nonsense for aristocrats. Food doesn't help either. You had dinner 3 hours ago, and still you're digesting. Or trying to. Hearty Victorian cuisine is delicious but catastrophic to the digestive tract. Mutton and heavy gravy. Kidney pudding. A surprise bit of tripe. The sheer density of your supper could stun a bear. And yet, insomnia isn't always about what you've eaten or what's making noise outside. Sometimes, it's what you're not allowed to say out loud. Grief, for instance. Your uncle passed this spring, and everyone simply said he's gone to his rest and moved on. You're expected to wear black, nod politely, and never, ever talk about how much you miss him. So the sadness slips out in quieter ways, like at 2:37 a.m., when your throat tightens for no reason and your eyes start to sting. It's also worth noting that being a woman doesn't help. If you're a lady of the era, your corset may have pinched a nerve earlier, or perhaps your husband took his snoring to record-breaking levels. You may also be struggling with the hidden panic of not being able to conceive, or worse, the knowledge that you did, and it didn't last. But no one talks about that either. Not in the parlor, and certainly not at tea. If you're a man, things aren't much easier. You're expected to be the provider, the stoic backbone of the household, even if your factory job is slowly poisoning you and your son just dropped out of school to chase dreams of ocean travel. You lie there, cataloging bills in your head, whispering to the ceiling, just 1 week without disaster. Please. Historians still argue whether Victorian insomnia was more emotional or environmental, but most agree it was deeply cultural. You weren't just fighting physical discomfort. You were wrestling with a society that demanded composure while quietly unraveling at the seams. Your eyelids flutter, and for a moment, you begin to drift. Then your brain, ever helpful, reminds you of the newspaper article about spontaneous combustion. Yes, that's a thing your society believes might happen. You try not to think about it. You fail. Outside, the wind picks up. A loose shutter bangs once. Twice. You picture a burglar. Or a ghost. Or one of those wild Irish cousins everyone pretends doesn't exist. You roll to your other side. You press your palm to your chest to feel your heartbeat. It's normal. That's a relief. Probably. And then, there's the guilt. In this time period, sleep isn't seen as something you deserve. It's something you earn. If you're lying awake, maybe it's because you didn't work hard enough. Or maybe you worked too hard. Or maybe God is trying to teach you humility. Whatever the reason, the culture won't let you off the hook. There's no self-care in 1861. There's just peppermint tea and prayer. Even the clergy have started preaching about sleeplessness, sermons filled with metaphors about spiritual rest and the soul's need to lie still before the Lord. You once fell asleep in one of those sermons. Ironically, it was the only good nap you had all week. Still, amid the worry and discomfort, there are moments of strange beauty. You notice the way the gaslight shimmers on the window pane. You listen to the rhythmic creak of a ship's mast in the harbor, carried all the way to your ears on a breeze. You hear a fox cry in the alley, a sound so eerie and human that it makes your spine tingle. It's almost 2 a.m. now. You decide to sit up for a bit. The kettle on the hearth still holds some warm water. You pour yourself a cup, add a splash of lemon if you're lucky enough to have it, and wrap yourself in a shawl that smells faintly of lavender and old books. You perch by the window and watch as fog rolls in like a ghostly tide. The city doesn't look tired, just hushed, as though it, too, is holding its breath. You exhale slowly. Maybe you'll try lying down again. Or maybe you'll stay right here, watching the shadows soften and the night stretch a little longer. You wake with a start, though wake might be generous. It's more of a surrender to reality. A gray smudge of dawn bleeds slowly into the window, but your body knows you've barely slept. Maybe an hour? 2. Time feels gelatinous. You shuffle toward the washstand and splash cold water on your face, hoping it will summon something resembling energy. It doesn't, but at least it shocks you back into consciousness. Now, if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on who you ask, you live in a household with access to remedies. The Victorian pharmacy cabinet is as full as it is reckless. Your first line of defense? Laudanum. Ah yes, that sweet, syrupy, utterly terrifying blend of opium and alcohol. You stare at the tiny bottle with its elegant label, Tincture Opii. It smells faintly of anise and bad decisions. A few drops in water, or directly under the tongue if you're feeling bold, and you might just float away into oblivion. Or develop a powerful dependency that will chase you into old age like a judgmental nursemaid. Still, it's popular for a reason. You sip carefully, eyes squinting at the taste, which is somewhere between medicine and misery. Victorians love laudanum. Writers, in particular, keep it close. Coleridge, De Quincey, half the Brownies, you can practically smell opium on their manuscripts. But you've also heard of others who took it a little too often. The housemaid's sister, for example, who drifted into such a fog she once boiled a sock instead of a potato. Historians still argue whether laudanum was a cure, a crutch, or a slow-acting social poison. The truth is likely a mix of all three. It worked, but at a cost no one liked to calculate. For the fainter-hearted, or perhaps just the wealthier, there's another option: floral sleep tonics. You try one, mixed by the apothecary 2 streets over. It contains valerian root, passion flower, and something that might be orange peel or soap shavings. The liquid smells like a garden that's been stepped on by a horse. But it's natural, and Victorians love anything botanical, especially when it's packaged in a green glass vial and costs more than a loaf of bread. The lady next door swears by crushed poppy seeds soaked in honey. She claims it knocks her out like a cathedral bell. You suspect it mostly gives her vivid dreams about choir boys and goat demons. But still, she's never looked tired. Then there's the clove and vinegar compress, draped elegantly over the forehead with the hope that it will banish your worries via smell alone. You give it a try. Your skin tingles, then burns, and you begin to suspect you've invented Victorian icy hot. Of course, sleep isn't just about getting unconscious. It's also about staying that way. Many a restless night ends with a sudden jolt, what some Victorian physicians call sleep shock. You may know it today as that falling sensation that jerks you awake just as you're drifting off. Back then, they thought it was the soul hesitating to leave the body. Comforting, really. You lie back down and try to recall the technique you heard from the widow at the grocer's. Count backwards from 500, picturing sheep jumping over a stile. You manage 497 before the sheep start judging you for your life choices. Another approach? Aromatics. You light a lavender sachet and wave it gently over the bed like you're performing a soft exorcism. The room smells pleasant now, at least, even if the ash has singed a hole in your only nightshirt. But the truth is, most Victorian cures only address half the problem. They're designed to calm the body, not the mind. And your mind is as restless as the Thames during flood season. You try prayer. Not because you're devout, necessarily, but because it has rhythm. You whisper the Lord's Prayer twice, then a Hail Mary just in case. By the end, you've added a personal footnote. Also, please help me fall asleep and not dream about that eel pie again. Still, There's something oddly tender about these rituals. The clumsy remedies, the hopeful tonics, the whispered appeals to unseen forces. You realize you're not alone. Millions of Victorians are lying in their beds right now, trying the exact same things. The empire may be vast and proud and brutal, but its people are, in the end, just sleepy mammals trying to survive the night. You think briefly about the stranger you saw at the chemist last week, pale, jittery, clutching a tiny bottle of chlorodyne like it held salvation. He looked like a man who hadn't truly rested since the Crimean War. And then, for the first time in hours, your eyelids grow heavy. Not in a dramatic, movie fade to black way. More like a curtain quietly sagging under its own weight. You exhale. The last thing you smell is lavender. Or maybe clove. Or possibly guilt. Sleep nudges you gently, like a cat testing your lap. And you let it. Word count, 1061. Awaiting continue. Band to NOI. Continue. ChatGPT to NOI. Section 4. You awaken once more, this time not to noise or discomfort, but to the sound of someone tapping gently on your forehead. Except it's not someone. It's a metal stick, held by a gentleman with an alarming mustache and a clipboard. You blink. You're not dreaming. Not yet. Welcome to Phrenology Hour. You sit in a stiff-backed chair while he examines the bumps on your scalp with the seriousness of a surgeon preparing for a duel. According to him, every curve and ridge on your skull holds vital secrets about your personality, including your ability, or failure, to sleep. You try not to giggle as he hums thoughtfully and announces, yes, a deficiency in the amativeness zone. Tragic for one so young. Phrenology is the pseudoscience darling of your time. Developed by Franz Joseph Gall in the late 18th century and now fully adopted by parlors and pocketbook philosophers alike, it claims that mental faculties live in specific parts of the brain, faculties which can be read by simply examining the shape of your head. It's nonsense, of course, but in Victorian Britain, it feels comfortingly scientific, especially when it comes with a printed chart and a respectable paper certificate. Your practitioner assures you that your sleepless tendencies likely stem from overstimulation of the destructiveness and combativeness lobes. You smile politely and try not to mention that you've never destroyed anything more aggressive than a pudding. To correct this imbalance, he prescribes not medicine, but habit change. Specifically, more quiet contemplation, less exposure to exciting literature, and, most confusingly, fewer potatoes. You nod solemnly. He recommends you sleep with your head pointed northeast. Magnetic alignment, he says, as though he's not just making this up on the spot. Historians still argue whether phrenology was a deliberate fraud or just an earnest, but hopelessly misguided attempt at understanding the mind. What's certain is that it gave people a narrative, a way to frame their quirks, their struggles, even their sleeplessness, as something scientific and fixable. And that's oddly comforting, in a brass caliper sort of way. After your cranial reading, you return home feeling strangely optimistic. Maybe your sleep troubles do have a physical cause. Maybe you're not a nervous wreck. Maybe you just have an unusually large cautiousness bump. You sit by your writing desk, flipping through the latest phrenology almanac. The illustrations are both hilarious and mildly offensive, tiny silhouettes of men labeled thief, poet, and spinster. There's also a helpful diagram showing that if you press on your temples while repeating the word tranquility, you may lull the hyperactive parts of your brain into sleep. You try it. You feel mostly silly. But hey, no one's watching. You doze a little in the armchair, only to be woken by your neighbor knocking to return the sugar she borrowed. She glances at the phrenology chart on your table and squints. Ah, she says, tapping her own forehead. I've got high veneration, you know. That's why I love church. You nod as if this explains everything, including her fondness for organ solos. Phrenology isn't the only mental model in town, though. There's also mesmerism, spiritualism, and the latest trend, self-improvement through mind dieting. This involves avoiding any stimulating thoughts past sundown. So no ghost stories, no passionate letters, and absolutely no reading the Times. You try this for one night. You make tea. You embroider a few lazy stitches. You avoid the bookshelf like it's cursed. You breathe deeply and whisper affirmations. I am a calm Victorian soul. I deserve peaceful sleep. Until your cat knocks over the ink bottle and you spend the next 30 minutes cleaning up the evidence. There's also the notion that certain shapes in your environment may influence your sleep. The latest fad claims that rounded furniture, no sharp corners, promotes mental softness. You briefly consider sawing the edges off your writing desk before realizing you're not quite that desperate yet. The irony of all this? None of it's exactly new. Even centuries before your time, people believed the shape of your body, your bed, or your bedroom could influence your inner life. You recall a medieval text that once claimed the soul could leak out through uncovered toes. Back in bed, you adjust your pillow, careful not to press too hard on your order region. You try to align yourself with the Earth's magnetic field. You hold an amethyst in your palm just in case. Yes, that's another new theory. The stone feels cool and vaguely judgmental. It's nearly midnight again. You sigh. The more you try to be scientific about sleep, the more elusive it becomes. Still, there's a comfort in trying. In tracing the mystery of your own brain. In believing, even foolishly, that your insomnia might be caused by something as simple as a bump behind your left ear. You close your eyes. The bumps can wait till morning. You're back in your own bed. Head properly aligned with magnetic north, or was it northeast? You can't remember. The pillow smells faintly of lavender and ink, a leftover from your earlier battle with spilled affirmations. Your body feels heavy now, and your eyes flutter, but sleep still lingers out of reach. You begin to wonder, what do the truly elite do to fall asleep? Not the neighbor with her mustard plasters. Not the phrenologist with his calipers. No, you want to know how the crowned and corseted deal with insomnia. So you imagine her, Queen Victoria herself, settling into her grand bed, the moonlight slipping through the lace of her canopy. She's not exactly a symbol of calm, after all. She ruled an empire while dressed in 50 layers of mourning, but she had her own peculiar bedtime routine. And tonight, you decide to borrow it. First, a brisk, lukewarm sponge bath. It's said she preferred hers laced with a drop of rosewater, just enough to feel indulgent without scandalizing the servants. You try it. It feels like being insulted by a flower. Then comes the cocoa, not the overly sweet kind, but a rich, gritty concoction made from ground nibs and just enough sugar to cut the bitterness. You sip it in your best imitation of regal poise. One hand daintily curled around the cup, the other holding open a slim volume of moral tales. You suspect Her Majesty might have read sermons or political dispatches. You go for Little Women. It's newer, but somehow soothing, like slipping into warm laundry. Of course, Victoria was not without her eccentricities. She kept meticulous diaries, writing every evening before bed. Her entries are often short and judgmental, peppered with understatements like, "Albert coughed gravely. Felt it in my bones." Concerning. You try journaling, but end up doodling a sheep in a nightcap. Close enough. There are rumors, never confirmed, that she kept a small glass vial of ether at her bedside. Not to use regularly, of course. Just to have. Like you might keep a jar of pickles in the back of the pantry in case of siege. It's unclear whether she ever inhaled from it, but even the idea of royal huffing is delightfully humanizing. You roll to your side and imagine what else might have been on her nightstand. A pressed flower from Balmoral? A snuff box shaped like a corgi? A handbell for summoning unfortunate maids at 2 a.m.? Still, for all her power, Queen Victoria didn't exactly sleep peacefully. Her grief for Prince Albert turned her nights into long vigils. She once wrote, "Sleep comes like a thief, but never steals enough." You sigh in solidarity. Same, girl. Same. Historians still argue whether the Queen's insomnia was physical, emotional, or a result of her overwhelming responsibilities. Likely, it was all three. And it's a quiet comfort to know that even the monarch, protected, pampered, swaddled in Egyptian cotton and guarded by palace walls, could not command sleep. Of course, not every member of the aristocracy had Victoria's restraint. You've heard whispered tales of countesses dosing themselves with morphine drops for the nerves, or dukes who demanded custom-fitted sleep masks lined with swan feathers and prayer. There's even a documented case of a baronet in Sussex who had an entire night garden built, a walled sanctuary of nocturnal flowers that bloomed only in moonlight, designed solely to help him fall asleep. You wonder what happened when it rained. You lie back and try to envision your own version of that. White lilies, pale foxglove, night-blooming jasmine, all glowing faintly under the stars. You picture yourself walking barefoot along the stone path, arms wrapped in a silk robe, trailing your fingers through the mist. It's a nice image. You almost drift off right there. But then, of course, your brain reminds you of that time you read about poisonous flowers and suddenly the imagined jasmine takes on a more sinister vibe. Thanks, brain. Still, you're trying. You fluff your pillow and imagine your own royal entourage preparing your bedroom for sleep. One lights a scented taper. Another adjusts the curtains just so. A third plucks a single, discordant thread from your blanket and bows before disappearing into the shadows. The illusion helps. For a moment, you feel enveloped by care. tucked into something softer than wool and warmer than brandy. You start to sink, ever so slightly, into that golden space between thoughts. And just as your breath begins to deepen, someone in the next building begins to practice the violin. Badly. You sigh. You roll your eyes. You forgive them, eventually. After all, Queen Victoria had bad nights too. By now, your nights have become a kind of performance, a delicate waltz between routine and rebellion. You've tried warm drinks, floral pillows, even imagining Queen Victoria's bedside ghost nodding approvingly. But still, your sleep eludes you like a cat who refuses to come when called. So tonight, you decide to get creative. You reach for something less royal and more unhinged. You open the bottom drawer of your nightstand, the one filled with oddities, and pull out two items, a glass vial labeled snail syrup and a folded advertisement for something called the hydroelectro sleep chair. The snail syrup comes first. It's cloudy, viscous, and smells faintly of parsley and dread. It was recommended by a widow in your parish who insists it cured her nervous palpitations. You give it a cautious swirl. It sloshes reluctantly. The label boasts mucus purified, harvested humanely, which only raises more questions. You take 1 teaspoon. It glides down your throat like a guilt-soaked apology letter. You feel nothing at first. Then a vague warmth, like being hugged by something damp. You wait 10 minutes. You wait 15. You swear you feel drowsier. Or maybe just regretful. You lie back and wonder how on earth anyone decided to turn snails into medicine. But hey, Victorians turned just about everything into medicine. Crushed pearls, bat wings, asparagus soaked in brandy, they were nothing if not inventive. Still, you need something more powerful tonight. And so, with a sense of cautious hope, you turn your gaze toward the folded paper ad. On it is a crude drawing of a man reclining in what looks like a barber's chair made entirely of copper tubing. Bolts surround his head. His hair is standing up. The headline reads, Dr. Browley's hydroelectro neuronap device. Sleep like a baby, wake like a prince. You're sold. You travel to the bathhouse at the edge of your neighborhood. They know you there. You're the restless one. The attendant nods without asking questions and leads you to the private chamber in the back, the one with the special chair. You step in. The air is thick with eucalyptus and the faint buzz of ambition. The chair itself is less impressive than the ad suggested. It's got wires, yes, and coils, and a suspicious puddle underneath. Still, you sit. A switch is thrown. Zap. Your muscles tense, briefly. The chair emits a low hum, and warm water jets begin to circulate around your legs. Then, a small electric current tingles across your spine. Not painful, just persuasive. This is the newest frontier in Victorian medicine, electrotherapy. A blend of water, vibration, and mild electric shock, all designed to stimulate the nerves toward repose. It sounds paradoxical. It is paradoxical. But Victorians believe in contradiction. They'll boil a cabbage and call it dessert. Historians still argue whether these electric baths actually did anything or simply served as elaborate placebos. Some patients swore by them. Others swore at them. And one unfortunate baron claimed the machine reversed his dreams. He now spoke fluent French only while unconscious. You stay in the chair for 15 minutes. It purrs. You twitch. You sweat gently through your cotton nightclothes. The experience is unsettling, but oddly relaxing. When it's over, you step out with the grace of someone exiting a spaceship. Your limbs feel noodle-like. Your thoughts drift sideways. Maybe this is what rest feels like. You return home barefoot, carrying your boots under one arm like a schoolboy who forgot his lunch. You collapse into bed, curls damp, mind buzzing gently like a bee in a bottle. You dream, finally. Not vividly, but enough to feel the edges of slumber. You see misty landscapes, jellyfish made of lace, a duck who offers unsolicited marriage advice. It's not restful exactly, but it's proof your brain remembers how to float. The next morning, your neighbor asks if you've been electrocuted or reborn. You just smile. That night, you consider repeating the experiment. But the snail syrup is gone, and you're not sure you want your dreams narrated by electrical interference. So you write in your journal instead, tried electricity, survived, dreamt of aquatic poultry, unsure of significance. You underline unsure 3 times. Still, there's something reassuring in knowing that for every sleepless soul, there's a remedy waiting, even if it involves snails and sockets. You lie back, wrap yourself in your blanket like a very tired pastry, and exhale. Maybe sleep is less about what works, and more about the stories we tell ourselves until it does. You open your eyes to dim candlelight and the scent of beeswax. It's past midnight again. Sleep gave you a fleeting embrace, then tiptoed off like a thief. You sigh, sitting upright, hair flattened on one side like you've been headbutting a bookshelf. Maybe you have. Tonight, you're trying something new again. You've heard whispers of a gentleman across town. No tinctures, no gadgets, no snail-related interventions. Just words. And a voice. They say he doesn't even need to touch you. Just look into your eyes and suggest you to sleep. You wrap yourself in a shawl, slip into your walking shoes, and head out under the gas lamps. The city is hushed, yet never truly asleep. You pass the bakery where dough is being kneaded for tomorrow's loaves, a pair of constables sipping tea on the curb, and the omnipresent clatter of horseshoes on wet cobbles. You avoid puddles with a practiced hop. The hypnotist's office is discreet, tucked between a tobacconist and a fortune-teller's parlor. The sign reads simply, Mr. Benjamin Vale, certified mesmerist, gentle sleep without drugs. You knock. He welcomes you with the poise of a stage magician and the mustache of a man who's very serious about cutlery. His office smells of star anise and dust. The wallpaper peels in one corner, revealing a faded fresco of cherubs looking vaguely scandalized. You sit in a velvet-upholstered chair. He dimly lights a single oil lamp and begins to speak, slowly, softly, as if reading bedtime tales to the concept of time itself. His voice is low and round, curling around your ears like a ribbon dipped in honey. He asks you to focus on a small glass pendulum. You try, but your eyes cross halfway through and you blink yourself out of it. He doesn't mind. Not all roads are straight, he murmurs, which may be comforting or just vague. Then he tells you to breathe in, and out, and in. You comply, more out of politeness than belief. But something in his cadence slows your pulse. It's as though your thoughts are being filed away, one by one, like letters in an orderly cabinet. Hypnosis, or mesmerism, as many still call it, is all the rage these days. It began with Franz Mesmer and his animal magnetism in the 18th century, which sounds a bit too intimate for most people's comfort. But modern hypnotists like Mr. Vale claim it's less about mysterious fluids and more about mental suggestion. Historians still argue whether Victorian hypnosis was truly effective or simply theatrical nonsense with good lighting. But countless patients insist it brought them calm, rest, and, occasionally, insights into past lives involving Tudor royalty and unfortunate maritime deaths. Mr. Vale continues speaking, not commanding, just coaxing. You are not tired, he says. You are being gently unwound. You briefly wonder if you're a pocket watch. He describes a staircase. You're descending it, one step at a time. You imagine each tread worn smooth by countless feet. He tells you there's a door at the bottom, and behind it, rest. Peace. A room where no one judges your dreams or remembers your embarrassing dinner conversations. You reach the door. You open it. You see nothing. Just warm darkness. It's oddly inviting. And then you snore. Briefly. Just once. You catch yourself and blink. Mr. Vale is smiling, not smugly, but kindly. Even a flicker of rest, he says, is more than most achieve unaided. You thank him. He hands you a small sachet of chamomile and crushed fennel for scent association and instructs you to repeat the word float 5 times before bed. You do, feeling only mildly ridiculous. Back at home, you find yourself moving slower. Not sleepier, exactly, but softer. Like your edges have been padded. You lie down. You whisper float once. Twice. A third time. Your tongue melts around the syllables. On the 4th repetition, your breathing has already settled. By the 5th, you've forgotten why you were saying it at all. The clock ticks. The curtains sway. Sleep circles you like a cat unsure if your lap is truly available. And then you remember that you dreamed of a staircase last week, too. But in that one, someone was chasing you. Tonight, they're not. You sink. You don't crash or collapse. You just allow gravity to have its say. Your dreams last night were brief but sweet. A floating staircase, a field of marshmallow clouds, a duck wearing a monocle, it's the closest to restful slumber you've had in weeks. Still, morning comes like a loud relative, early, insistent, and carrying damp socks. You rise, yawn, and pull back the heavy curtains. Gray light spills in London's version of sunshine. The street outside is already stirring. You watch a baker carry crates of bread, a lamplighter extinguishing the last flickers, and across the street, a woman shaking crumbs from her window in a practiced, mechanical way. You brew tea and sit in your favorite chair. Sleep eludes you again tonight, but this time, not because of failed remedies or restless dreams. This time, it's empathy. Because if anyone has it worse than you in the sleep department, it's the working poor. You've heard the stories. The laundress who works 14 hours and still wakes in the night from phantom steam. The chimney sweep with ash in his lungs who sleeps standing in a corner, too stiff to lie down. The factory girl who shares her bed with 3 sisters and 2 rats, and still manages to whisper prayers before sleep. Insomnia, you realize, is not a luxury. It's a burden worn across class lines, but differently. For you, it's a medical curiosity, an emotional nuisance. For them, it's a symptom of pure exhaustion that never quite crosses into rest. You imagine a tenement house. For flights up, a room the size of your wardrobe. 8 people wedged into 2 beds and a pile of straw. 1 candle. No privacy. Every breath shared. They don't have hypnotists. Or laudanum. Or snail syrup, for that matter. They have soot, cold tea, and the hope that maybe, if they close their eyes hard enough, they'll forget their cracked hands and unpaid bills. You read in a pamphlet, passed around discreetly at the last temperance meeting, that over half of London's laborers survive on 4 hours of sleep a night. Historians still argue whether these numbers were exaggerated to drum up sympathy or donations, but either way, the facts are grim. And it's not just the hours, it's the interruptions. Police whistles. Infants crying. Men stumbling home from gin shops. The endless sound of boots on floorboards. Someone always waking, someone always working. Then there's the psychological toll. How do you sleep when you're one illness away from starvation? When your landlord threatens eviction over a missed payment? When your child coughs in the night and you know there's no money for a doctor? You once spoke to a maid, Mary, she said, who confessed she hadn't slept properly in 3 years. I close my eyes, she whispered, but my body don't believe it. She said this with a half-smile, as if it were a charming quirk and not a slow form of erasure. It humbles you. You take a slow sip of tea. It's gone lukewarm. You barely notice. The irony is that many of the remedies you've tried, chamomile, floral baths, reading by candlelight, are impossible luxuries for the poor. Their nighttime routine is simple, collapse. And if sleep doesn't come, well, at least they're horizontal. You feel a tug of guilt, but also admiration. The resilience. The humor. The way they joke about their own sleeplessness like it's just another rude cousin in the attic. You recall a story in the papers last week, a girl from Spitalfields who taught herself to dream lucidly as an escape. If I'm going to lie awake, she said, I might as well fly. You wonder what she dreams of. Probably not duck monocle aristocrats. You try to honor them tonight in your own small way. No elaborate concoctions. No buzzing chairs or crystal pendulums. Just darkness. Silence. And a wish, a quiet one, that somewhere, someone in a crowded room is sleeping peacefully for once. You lie back, hands folded, and try not to think of cracked floorboards or worn shoes or the bitter ache of too much survival. You close your eyes. Tonight, you sleep for Mary, too. Your candle has burned low, casting long shadows against the wall like slow-moving dancers. The warmth from your tea has faded, and your eyelids feel as heavy as Victorian drapery. Still, curiosity pushes you up from the mattress one more time. Tonight, you're chasing sleep not with plants, potions, or pity, but with progress. You fumble in your drawer and retrieve a neatly folded pamphlet you picked up from the apothecary weeks ago. The title reads, Introducing Dr. Bin's Mechanical Marvel, the Somnomotor Restorative Apparatus, Patent Pending. You unfold the pages with a mixture of skepticism and hope. The diagrams show a rather chaotic-looking device, gears, pulleys, tubes, and something resembling a musical box. It's supposed to lull the body into a state of near-automatic rest through the combined force of rotary lull and gentle cranial tapping. You snort softly. Cranial tapping, you mutter, because nothing says peaceful like being rhythmically thumped on the head. But you're not above a little foolishness in pursuit of rest. So you visit the storefront listed on the back page, located 2 blocks from the river, tucked behind a shop that sells mothballs and suspiciously unlabeled jam. Inside, the clinic smells like melted glue and ambition. Dr. Binns himself greets you with wild eyes and a waistcoat covered in soot. His hair stands up as though perpetually electrocuted. Trouble sleeping? He asks, as though there's another reason one might willingly sit in a chair attached to 17 ticking components. He straps you in. Not tightly, just enough to keep you still. A padded collar supports your neck. A copper arm lowers gently to rest on your forehead. Somewhere behind you, a crank turns with an apologetic squeak. And then motion. A slow hum begins, not unlike the first note of a church organ warming up. The gears engage, and the machine begins a rhythmic tapping on your temple, like a patient finger trying to remember a tune. You raise an eyebrow, but you don't hate it. Next, a soft vibration begins in the lower spine, courtesy of two rotating discs powered by steam. It's oddly soothing, like being purred at by a very calm raccoon. Then comes the real magic, the lull mechanism. A small arm, resembling a metronome attached to a paintbrush, swings back and forth in front of your eyes. Its tip glimmers with mica dust, catching the light in hypnotic pulses. Left, right, left, right. Each swing is just slow enough to follow, just fast enough to keep you trying. You feel your thoughts stalling. Your muscles melt, and for a moment, you forget why you were awake in the first place. Dr. Binns mutters something about neural entrainment and somatic entrancement. You nod vaguely. You're busy following the glitter brush. Historians still argue whether devices like Binns had any merit or if they were elaborate placebo machines designed to impress the over-anxious middle class. But many Victorians swore by them, especially those who distrusted drugs but adored gadgets. There was, of course, the famous scandal involving the Somnofan, a rival machine that accidentally caught fire during a demonstration at the Royal Exhibition. One woman claimed she hallucinated Napoleon giving her fashion advice. Sales sword. Binns' machine is far less dramatic. It doesn't cure your insomnia, but it quiets it. It distracts the part of your brain that insists on cataloging regrets and social faux pas from 2007. You spend 30 minutes in the chair, emerging as if from a warm bath. Limbs heavy, breathing slowed. Mind fuzzy, not dull, just distant. Like your thoughts have wandered off to a neighboring village and promised to return with bread. You tip your hat to Dr. Binns and leave, promising to return. He hands you a complimentary tin of sleepy cog oil as a souvenir. You don't know what it's for. You're too tired to care. That night, back in bed, you feel the ghost of the tapping on your temple. It's not unpleasant, like a friend patting your thoughts into stillness. You fall asleep without trying, which, as anyone who's suffered from insomnia knows, is the only way it ever really works. In your dream, gears turn smoothly inside your head. A bird made of brass sings lullabies in Morse code. You ride a bicycle made of cushions. You don't even snore. You awaken feeling oddly refreshed until you catch sight of the tin of sleepy cog oil on your nightstand and remember everything. The machine, the tapping, the mechanical bird dream. A smile plays across your lips. It was absurd, yes, but the absurdity was what helped. Still, you know that no mechanical marvel will ever quiet the one thing that keeps most Victorians up at night: guilt. And not just the regular kind, moral guilt, spiritual guilt, or even unpaid debt guilt, but something far more taboo: improper thoughts. More specifically, of the solo variety. You clutch your covers just a bit tighter. Because tonight's story, whether you like it or not, tiptoes into the flickering candlelit corridors of Victorian repression. For all their outward prudery, Victorians were obsessed with sleep purity, and that included moral hygiene. And few things, according to doctors, ministers, and pamphleteers, corrupted one's sleep more than self-abuse. Yes, the M-word. In bedrooms across Britain, whispers circulated that insomnia was punishment for private sins. A sleepless night wasn't just unfortunate, it was diagnostic. A red flag of nocturnal moral failure. And the fear of this reputation was enough to keep many wide-eyed in the dark, praying feverishly that sleep would wash away unspoken shame. You rise from bed and pull out the infamous Guide to Clean Living, handed out at last week's youth group. Page 14 reads, "Disturbed slumber is the body's alarm. Heed it, lest the soul perish." Subtle. The pamphlet includes helpful illustrations of ideal sleeping positions. Arms above the covers, eyes heavenward, preferably with a Bible tucked somewhere near the feet. There's even a sleep chastity chart to track dream purity. You can't help but wonder who was reviewing those. Young boys were the primary targets of these campaigns. Enter the anti-masturbation devices, leather mittens, spiked rings, and, in one horrifying case, a spring-loaded trap that activated at certain movements. They were sold under names like the Nocturnal Chastener and the Reverence Belt. One poor soul reportedly triggered his in church. During Easter Mass, girls, though less publicly discussed, were not spared. Their nocturnal lapses were attributed to wandering wombs, overexcitement from novels, or unsupervised piano playing after dusk. Yes, you heard that right, piano. After dusk. You sit now with a growing sense of disbelief. It would be laughable if it weren't so widely believed. Parents wrote to doctors in panicked tones. "My son tosses in the night and avoids eye contact at breakfast. Is it too late?" Clergymen delivered sermons on the dangers of unguarded dreams. Schools implemented purity monitors who literally watched children sleep. Historians still argue whether these moral campaigns were genuinely rooted in concern for health or just creative repression disguised as science. Either way, the result was generations of people terrified of their own bodies and haunted by the idea that dreams themselves could betray them. You recall a boarding school friend who tied his ankles together at night, another who confessed to sleeping with a crucifix under each armpit, and yet both still looked perpetually exhausted. The irony, of course, is that the fear of unwholesome thoughts often caused the insomnia it was meant to cure. People lay in bed, nervously reviewing their behavior, praying not to dream of anything vaguely warm-blooded. And the more they tried to control their subconscious, the more their minds revolted, tossing up images of bare ankles, forbidden dance partners, or that dreamy street violinist with the tragic cheekbones. Tonight, you decide to rebel. Not scandalously, just gently. You take your evening cocoa without shame. You hum a dance tune under your breath, piano be damned. And when you lie down, you allow your mind to wander. Not wildly, but freely. You let the thoughts rise and fall like waves. You give them no labels, no shame, no punishment. Just space. And something strange happens. You sleep. Not deeply, not for long, but without guilt. You dream of a ballroom with no chaperones, of roses blooming in strange colors, of a pamphlet that reads, "You are a human being." Sleep is not a test. You wake feeling like someone's patted your soul on the back. The tin of sleepy cog oil sits untouched tonight. You won't need it. Morning comes quietly. For once, your eyes open not with dread or disappointment, but with a gentle sigh. You've slept. Not perfectly, but enough. You stretch in bed, feeling your joints crack like ancient floorboards and your mind flutter with cautious optimism. You pad softly into the kitchen and slice yourself a piece of bread. No dreams of machines. No hypnoducks. Just an ordinary night, capped with rest. And for that, you're grateful. Still, there's a new theory to test. A suspicion whispered by many in drawing rooms and health salons alike, that your insomnia might not be about what happens in bed, but before it. Specifically, dinner. You recall the warning from your physician, a man who once called sugar a midnight demon and frowned at potatoes like they owed him money. According to him, digestion is the gatekeeper of dreams. Eat wrong, and you invite nightmares. Or worse, indigestion with moral undertones. Victorians, in all their lace-draped wisdom, had dinner late. We're not talking 6 or 7. We're talking 9 o'clock, sometimes 10, depending on your social status. And the meals? Monstrous. We're talking roast beef, kidneys on toast, pickled walnuts, blancmange, eel jelly, trifle, and 5 different cheeses, all layered with sauces and social anxiety. So tonight, you decide to relive the ritual. At 8:45 p.m., your dining room is set. A candle flickers. A heavy napkin lies ominously across your lap. The first course arrives, mock turtle soup. It's not made from turtles, but rather calf's head, boiled down into something that smells oddly philosophical. Then, roast goose, stuffed with oysters, drenched in gravy thick enough to thatch a roof. You chew slowly, carefully, suspiciously. You are not a goose. You do not digest like a goose. And yet, here you are. You follow with jellied aspic, beef suspended in gelatin, because texture should be challenging. Then cheese. Then stewed plums. By the end, your stomach is confused. Offended, even. You lie down an hour later, as tradition would suggest, propped on 3 pillows and whispering apologies to your own liver. Sleep does not come. Instead, you dream of being chased by a blancmange wielding a monocle and a fork. You wake at 2 a.m., heart pounding, mouth dry, and stomach bubbling like a cauldron of regret. It seems your body does not enjoy hosting a Renaissance banquet after sunset. The next day, you swear off late dinners forever, but not before digging through the etiquette manual for justification. A passage from the lady's domestic companion reads, "A late supper produces dreams most unnatural. Let the stomach rest as the soul intends to." Subtle, passive-aggressive, very Victorian. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some physicians argue that a warm, substantial dinner promotes sleep. One even suggests minced veal and warm milk as the ideal dream tonic. You try it. It tastes like surrender. You fall asleep anyway. Historians still argue whether it was the ingredients, the timing, or simply the stress of mealtime etiquette that caused Victorian digestion to clash with sleep. Between tight corsets, heavy sauces, and the pressure to discuss politics without making eye contact, dinner was rarely peaceful. And yet, food held ritual power. It was one of the few socially accepted moments of indulgence, of pleasure, of fullness, however fleeting. You decide to revise your habits. Smaller portions. Sooner. Maybe a slice of bread with marmalade and a chamomile tisane. Maybe not every night needs to include organ meat. And to your surprise, it helps. You no longer lie in bed listening to your stomach hold court with your guilt. Instead, you sleep in small, even slices. Not the deep plunge into unconsciousness you once hoped for, but a drifting, a bobbing on soft waters. You dream of simpler foods. Apples, tea, quiet tables with candlelight and no conversation. And when you wake, for once, you're not hungry for sleep. The dreams last night were light, like scattered crumbs on the table of sleep, but enough to leave a pleasant aftertaste. You stretch, rubbing your eyes as the first slivers of morning filter through lace curtains. The fog outside is thick today, clinging to rooftops like old gossip. You sip tea and turn your thoughts to another theory. Because while your nights have been slowly improving, you can't help but wonder, was insomnia strictly a British affliction? Tonight, you travel in your imagination across oceans and empires to explore what sleeplessness looked like in the far reaches of Victorian colonial rule. For if London whispered of rest, its colonies shouted exhaustion. First stop, Bombay, 1870. You picture a British official wiping sweat from his collar as he lies beneath a slow-turning fan. The air is thick with spice and humidity. Outside, rickshaws rattle and street dogs bark. Inside, he's wide awake, eyes tracing cracks in the plaster ceiling, mosquito net buzzing faintly like a nervous chorus. The heat is relentless. The pillows feel like boiled rice. And worst of all, the cultural clock clashes violently with his internal one. Afternoon siestas and early morning bustle confuse his habits. The local cures, tamarind seed infusions, neem smoke wafted over the bed, a paste of sandalwood on the forehead, seem foreign to him, though they've soothed others for centuries. He writes in his journal, the natives sleep peacefully. Perhaps it is their diet, or their sins are lighter. You roll your eyes. Colonial arrogance sleeps even less than its agents. In Jamaica, insomnia wears a different face. Enslaved people, some recently freed, some still indentured, sleep in shifts, bodies curled against each other for warmth. Sleep, for them, has always been fragile. Not a right, but a rhythm stolen in pieces. A luxury earned only after labor. A Creole healer, known to locals simply as Ma Esther, swears by bush tea brewed from fever grass, wild basil, and guinea hen weed. She massages tired limbs, murmurs prayers in patois, and teaches others to hum a deep note as they fall asleep. Something she calls a belly sound. You hum it now yourself, softly, and feel its vibrations settle into your ribs like a purring cat. Further south, in British Guiana, a doctor catalogs the local insomnia remedies: cassava liquor, oil massages, even sleep hammocks strung beneath banana trees. He records them clinically, omitting any credit to the people who've passed them down for generations. Historians still argue whether these colonial discoveries were theft or exchange, though most agree the balance tilted toward the former. You drift now to Southeast Asia. In Burma, Buddhist monks chant themselves to sleep. No tonics, no machines, just breath and repetition. Sleep is not something they pursue, it arrives when invited. A lesson your caffeine-rattled brain struggles to absorb. And in northern Australia, you imagine an Aboriginal elder lying beneath a starlit sky, wrapped in a kangaroo hide, listening to the dreamtime stories of her ancestors carried on the wind. Sleep and story are not separate for her. One flows into the other. The line blurs. You feel a tug in your chest, part wonder, part longing. Back in England, no one's humming into sleep. The remedies are printed, sold, prescribed. But in the colonies, sleep lives orally. Whispered, handed down like lullabies. There's less shame in sleeplessness. More ritual, less restraint. You return from your mental voyage with a mixture of awe and guilt. The empire's reach was long, but so were the nights endured by those under its shadow. The British exported bureaucracy, bricks, and beds, but in return, they inherited new ways of dreaming. You decide to borrow one tonight. You brew a tea of lemongrass and ginger, light a candle, and hum the note Ma Esther spoke of, a low sound, vibrating in your chest like a cello string. It feels good, centering, honest. You lie down and repeat the hum. Once, twice, a third time. Your breath slows. Your limbs unfurl. And as you sink into sleep, you feel not like a subject of empire, but a small creature tucked into the earth, rocked gently by the weight of history and the sound of your own humming bones. Your bones feel quieter today. It's not a word often used for bones, but it fits. You feel less buzz, less twitch, like the orchestra in your nervous system has finally put down their instruments and gone home. But even in this state of growing calm, you remain curious. Not everything that happens in sleep is peaceful. Victorians knew this well, perhaps too well, and in the name of science, they began to study it. Tonight, you allow yourself to become the subject of an experiment. You slide beneath the covers and imagine yourself not as a restless soul, but as data. Someone's patient, someone's mystery. Because this was an era when physicians and philosophers began, in earnest, to ask, what really happens when we sleep? And more to the point, what happens when we don't? The earliest sleep studies were strange, tender, and faintly ridiculous. You picture yourself in a ward at St. Thomas's Hospital, lying under stiff sheets while a nurse with tired eyes and impeccable posture sits nearby, pencil in hand. She records your breathing patterns, notes every toss, every sigh. Occasionally, she leans in to whisper, still awake. You want to reply, not anymore now. She's not alone. Across London, Paris, and even New York, sleep observation chambers are being built in the backs of clinics and universities. They're not exactly cozy. Think oil lamps, uncomfortable beds, and a window through which several mustached gentlemen can peer in, nodding sagely. You try not to be bothered by this image as you nestle into your own pillow. You'd think the patients were all insomniacs, but no. Some are simply volunteers. Others are asylum residents, offered a warm bed in exchange for a night under scrutiny. And some are military veterans, willing to trade war stories for laudanum-laced lullabies and a promise of dreamless rest. One particularly ambitious French doctor, Dr. Maurice Lemoyne, built a contraption that dripped water onto the subject's forehead at regular intervals while a bell chimed every 15 minutes. He believed this would help track the sleep threshold. You believe it would make you scream. Closer to home, British scientists began using ink rollers to trace eye movement. Primitive, yes. Messy, certainly. But they were grasping at something. Something slippery. The transition between consciousness and the deep ocean of dreams. Historians still argue whether these early studies were helpful or simply acts of well-meaning voyeurism. But many agree they laid the groundwork for modern sleep science, even if they involved far too many leather straps and charts drawn in candlelight. And it wasn't just the doctors who were watching. Families became amateur scientists, too. Parents crept into children's bedrooms, noting sleep positions. Spouses kept dream journals for each other. Even newspapers published letters from readers reporting their own hypnagogic sensations, shivers, visions, the dreaded feeling of a ghost cat sitting on their chest. You once read about a woman in Yorkshire who insisted she floated 2 feet above her mattress every third Wednesday. Her husband built a frame to measure it. She swore by the results. He swore at the expense. Victorians feared sleep and adored it. It was both mystery and medicine, and it was beginning to be measured, which, in this era, made anything real. You lie still now, imagining someone observing you. Not unkindly, not clinically, just curiously. They note your breath slowing, your fingertips twitching. They whisper, subject appears calm, possibly dreaming. You are. In your dream, you're in one of those old laboratories. But it's warm. The walls are padded with velvet, the oil lamp glows soft. The observers are cats wearing monocles. One nods and writes, excellent twitch response. You sleep deeper. In real life, your body shifts, and you wrap yourself tighter in the blanket. No nurse hovers. No chart is kept. But you feel watched, in the best way. As if the universe itself is taking notes, approving of your attempt. Tonight, you give yourself over to the strange Victorian belief that sleep can be studied and honored, that there's value in watching, in wondering, and whispering to the sleeper as they drift. Your dream shifts again. You're the nurse now, watching yourself. You smile. You tuck the blanket closer. You dim the imaginary lamp. And you sleep. You wake up to the sharp creak of a bed slat giving up under your left shoulder. Not broken, just exhausted. Like you, but less so than usual. You stretch, pat your pillow affectionately, and sip the tepid tea you left for yourself last night like a small, practical gift from past you. There's no dream residue this morning. No lingering images of monocled cats or dripping sleep clocks. Just quiet. And still, there's one final frontier in your Victorian sleep saga. The battlefield no tonic, hypnotist, or electrochair can fully conquer. The shared bed. Because while you may have fought for sleep every night, someone else may have been right beside you, snoring, twitching, and absolutely unaware of their crimes. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and think of all the Victorian couples who, in theory, should be gently co-dreaming their way through life. But in reality, are locked in nightly combat involving blanket theft, foot collisions, and passive-aggressive sighs. Your friend Clara, married at 20 and unamused by her husband's nasal concerts, once joked that she'd sooner share a bed with a goose. At least they hiss politely, she'd said. Marital sleep arrangements in the Victorian age were more varied than most assume. While romantic paintings often depict a couple entwined in moonlit slumber, the truth was often far more practical and occasionally hilarious. Many couples, especially among the upper class, slept in separate beds, some in separate rooms entirely. Victorian furniture catalogs even advertised his and hers twin bed sets as a sign of civilized modernity. Beds weren't about intimacy. They were about order. Others, particularly in tighter quarters, had no choice but to share. But they did so under a strict code. Lie still, don't talk, face the wall if you must sneeze, and for heaven's sake, don't dream aloud. You once overheard a neighbor yelling in his sleep about misplaced tax documents. His wife spent the next week angry at him for things he'd only done in REM. And then, of course, there were the sounds. Snoring, farting, the occasional muttered confession. It was considered deeply impolite to comment on such things, yet everyone did, over tea, at sewing circles, or in the margins of diaries. One pamphlet titled The Etiquette of the Marital Mattress included this gem. If your spouse is troubled by your midnight emissions, nasal or otherwise, consider inserting a cloth soaked in mint beneath your pillow and facing due west. Historians still argue whether this was meant sincerely or as satire. Hard to say. And while snoring was an equal opportunity offender, women were more likely to apologize for it. Men, on the other hand, invented elaborate stories about throat tension from public speaking or dreaming of battle. It was not uncommon for couples to employ sleep solutions like tying themselves to opposite bedposts, separating with bolsters, or wearing ear trumpet-style sleep cones that redirected breathing. One woman you knew claimed to have invented a snore muffler involving 2 feathers and a satin ribbon. It worked beautifully until she sneezed and nearly strangled herself. Then there was the invention of the sleep divorce, a charming Victorian term for couples who, without fanfare or paperwork, quietly began sleeping in separate rooms. No scandal, no drama, just a slow, mutual agreement that love was best expressed at breakfast, not while dodging elbows. You lie in bed now and look to the space beside you. Empty, peaceful, but you smile, imagining what it would be like to share this bed, to negotiate warmth, to grumble and sink, to laugh at mutual fatigue. The Victorians understood that sharing a bed was about far more than proximity. It was trust, patience, the willingness to lie next to another soul and say, silently, I won't steal the blanket if you don't talk in your sleep about your ex-fiancé again. You curl onto your side, drawing the blanket up under your chin. And tonight, you let yourself dream, not just of solitude, or escape, or machinery, but of quiet companionship. 2 people, side by side, letting the darkness wrap around them like shared velvet. Because sometimes, even a restless night is gentler when there's a hand to bump into. The wind rustles faintly outside your window tonight, like a conversation between trees that doesn't concern you. You shift under the covers, your legs tangled in soft cotton sheets, and breathe in the familiar scent of candle smoke and lavender oil that now clings to your pillows like a patient friend. You've tried nearly every remedy Victorian England has offered, some lovely, some laughable, some questionable at best. You've hummed, sipped, soaked, prayed, journaled, been tapped on the head by a gear-driven contraption, and stared down your skull's phrenological destiny. And in the end, maybe the most important thing you've discovered is this. Sleep isn't something you win. It's something you invite. Gently. The city outside is winding down. The gas lamps burn lower. The horses are fewer. Somewhere, a pie shop is closing, a servant is folding sheets, and a doctor is scribbling one last note in the margin of a patient's insomnia logbook. You smile faintly, knowing you are part of this quiet, unseen brotherhood of the sleepless, the soot-dusted, the gently bewildered. You think of all the things Victorians blamed for their restlessness: moral weakness, digestive recklessness, magnetic misalignment, phantom diseases of the nervous system. And yet, at the core of it all was just being human. Anxious, hopeful, overstimulated human beings trying to lie still in the dark. Historians still argue whether insomnia was a Victorian invention or simply a newly labeled facet of the human condition. But as you lie there tonight, that argument feels very far away. What matters is this: you understand your sleeplessness a little more now. Its shape, its voices, its odd, theatrical demands. And you've met it not as an enemy, but as a guest. Irritating, yes, but maybe just lonely. Your eyes close naturally now. You let the memories drift. Of Queen Victoria's quiet morning rituals, of snore cones and scented sachets, of warm milk sipped in foggy kitchens, of girls humming belly notes in starlit shacks far across the sea. And as your breath slows, you imagine the gaslights of the city flickering out, one by one. A hush settling across rooftops, through parlors, down alleys. The death of the Victorian night is not dramatic. It's not explosive. It's not even sad. It's just peaceful. Because by the turn of the century, electricity will come. Sleep studies will grow scientific. The tonics will give way to tablets. And the language around sleeplessness will change. But for now, you rest in a world that's trying, earnestly, foolishly, tenderly, to understand how to close its eyes. You curl your fingers under the pillow and whisper to the shadows. Good night. Wind down, approximate 300 words. And now, as your thoughts begin to loosen like the laces on old boots, let's leave the clatter and curiosity behind. Let the echo of ticking clocks fade into the wallpaper. Let the glow of the gas lamps blur at the edges. There's nothing left to fix tonight. No more remedies to test. No more stories to unfold. Just you, the hush, and the softness growing behind your eyes. Breathe in, slowly, and feel your chest rise like fog lifting from a quiet field. Hold it for a moment. Then let it go, like an old memory. No need to carry anything forward. Not even this voice. Not even your name. In your mind, imagine a candle being gently snuffed out. One, then another. Each breath a little darker, a little deeper. Let your body sink into the mattress, like warm bread into honey, like a pebble resting at the bottom of a clear stream. There's no rush now. No pressure. If sleep comes, it comes. If not, you've still created a pocket of stillness in the world. And that, in itself, is rare, is worthy, is enough. So wherever you are, whether on a couch, in a quiet room, beneath stars or beneath plaster, know that you are safe. You are whole. You are here. And this moment is yours. Let go. Drift. I'll see you in the next story.